So when did you when did you become an entrepreneur? When did you think that you wanted to build businesses and stuff? When was that focus for you?
Yeah, I thought about that. In I think it was 91 or 92, I went to work for Sam Zell in the, equity. And I think that's where I really recognized that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. In those days, it was really kind of the Wild West in Sam's organization. I mean, Sam and Bob had built just an unusual amount of wealth in a relatively short period of time. They were interesting
Who was Bob?
Bob Lurie. Bob Lurie, Lurie, you've heard of the Lurie Children's Hospital.
Yeah.
That's Ann Lurie. That's Bob. That was Bob's partner, and he died, I think, in maybe 1991 or 92. I think Bob died. So he died early of lung cancer. But those guys were partners for a long period of time. They had been partners since they were at the University of Michigan. And built a lot of private real estate and really were great entrepreneurs. And, I went to work for those guys and they were just interesting and fascinating and just the ability to do your own thing, it just was inside of me. Right. I mean, you realized it right away and you just loved it. And especially in the early days at Equity, you could kind of be an entrepreneur with a lot of net below you. You and I don't have a net anymore, Gary. There was a lot of net below you when you were at Equity. Then while I was there, we did 3 public offerings. We did manufactured housing, which is MHC. We did equity residential, which is EQR, and then we did equity office, which is EOP. And then I wound up staying in equity residential. I became a senior vice president for business development, kind of doing acquisitions and some other work. And that was thrilling and exciting. And like anything else, we went from about a $300 million, when we went public at EQR, we went public at $300 million. And by the time I left, we were a $9 billion company. So
wow.
Dramatic change in dramatic change in how you.
What was your role there?
Well, my role was generating revenue from sources other than rent. So if you can think about it, if you're in the property business, your main source of income is rent. But we had developed all kinds of ways to actually increase revenues at properties from areas unrelated to rent, and these were unheard of previously, and so it started with little things like washing machines in basements, and then it was billing for cable and internet. Then it turned into billing for water and sewer and all kinds of things like that. So basically developing businesses that were attendant to the real estate, where the real estate owner could actually derive some profit. And by the time I left, on a $9 billion company, we were adding about 4 cents a share from that avenue. And so it was a relatively large business sector, which exists today. So and that really gave me the ability to do a lot of really kind of big, large deals that I never would have been able to do.
Nice.
But it was a large company. It became a very large company.
Your experience in the military gave you kind of structure and all that kind of stuff. What do you feel it gave you to be successful in business for Sam? And then today, not who we are today, even.
Yeah, I think that the military is really if I had a recommendation for anybody who's 25 years old or 23 years old, it would be to spend 2 to 5 years in the military. Be patient, right? Because that's a very short period of time for a young man. and get the experience, because it's all about, and you know this, Gary, because I think you're a natural leader. It's all about leadership. And I think that, you know, what you learn in the military is how to be a leader, particularly on the officer side, right? And you learn the need and the commitment to team and to your people. And I think that those are, you know, very fundamental things that people can learn in all sorts of areas of life. But I think they're particularly acute on the military side, especially when you're confronted with challenging environments. And I think that those were things that you just couldn't replace.
Sure.
It is and it's all about discipline too. It's discipline and sweating the details without getting wrapped around the axle about those details. And so you got to know the function of everyone on your team, and you got to be able to do those functions. And I think leading from the front is the most important thing.
So I've got a son that's a senior in high school. He's always been a little immature. He was born with some issues, but he's gotten through those issues when it comes to some cerebral palsy and fetal alcohol syndrome. Is that we adopted him from Russia. You may know the story about Nikita or 19. Anyway, bottom line is he likes the idea of the military. He's a strong little son of a gun. You know, he's pound for pound, he bench presses over twice his weight. He doesn't work out very much, right? He's really strong little guy, physically fit, and he doesn't like school, but he wants to join the military. Does he stick out, even though he's not good academically, doesn't like to be at school? Does he stick out at 4 years of college so that he can start in the military at a better position with right into leadership, or does he just join? Right, that's the question. That's kind of what we're going back and forth on right now.
Yeah, I think the military requires a great deal of discipline, and whether officer enlisted, it's all about school. I mean, there's an entire line of education from the day that you get in the door until the day that you leave. I mean, I was going to the Navy War College at 50 years old, spending a year reading Clausewitz on war, and so your education never stops, and it starts the minute you walk in the door. And so I think that getting an education first, a college education, is a good thing, because it gives you a little bit of discipline on before you get to the military, because he's going to need that, and it really is all about learning in the military.
So you're saying the habit of learning is one of the most important things, and if he doesn't like it now, he's going to have to like it then. So why not, right?
Yeah.
Get that habit in college. Even if he goes to junior college for a couple of years and a 4-year college the last 2 years, right?
I think that's I think junior colleges, frankly, are a good way to go for people who haven't really figured out yet where they like education or not, because they can spend a couple of years, being at home, and it's I think it's a huge benefit. It gives you the right maturity when you go in too. And there's certainly kids that make the transition from, being 17, coming into the military, and 3 or 4 years later, they're a different individual. But I think the more successful people are the ones that have some level of education even before they go in. And they just do better, because there's a little bit of discipline that education brings to the table. And in the military, it's not just about being a leader in the military. It's also, you got to know how to be a leader, and you got to know how to be a follower too, right? I mean, because and so I think that learning kind of gives you a little bit of the day-to-day self-discipline that is going to be required.
Sure. Okay, so let's talk about some military experiences. What's some crazy experiences you've had in the military, and things that you love to hear a couple of stories if you got them.
Well, I guess I don't necessarily like to tell stories about crazy stuff, but I think that I was in the military in the right place at the right time to have the right experiences in life. And that's all I can say. I mean, 9/11 came along, and I had already been in the military for, over 10 years, and it was a peacetime military. I mean, we were really at peace for all practical purposes.
Sure.
And it was we had we had Panama and the first Gulf War, which lasted a couple of months. I mean, but for all practical purposes, we were essentially a peacetime military. And so then we transitioned to a real wartime military. And I think that you get the real sense of what the military.
I lost you after Panama, Ozzy. I don't know if these guys, Chris, did you hear Ozzy after Panama?
I did, yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, I heard him.
You guys got me okay?
You can start over anyways, if that's okay.
After Panama.
I just said we were essentially in a peacetime military. I mean, you had events like Panama with Noriega, and you had kind of the first Gulf War that was, a relatively short period of time. But for all practical purposes, we were in kind of a peacetime military for a very long period of time. After Vietnam, and then kind of into this phase, and then we had 9/11, and of course we really transitioned from a peacetime military to a wartime military. And I think the military is really at its best when it's fighting a war. And not that any military officer, at least that I know, the good ones, really want a war, but it's what the military does best. And I think that I actually was so fortunate because I got to work at a place called JSOC, which is the Joint Special Operations Command, for a very long period of time. And that element, had a great deal to do with the war on terrorism. And so I had the good fortune of working for General McChrystal, Admiral McCraven, General Votel, and these individuals, Tony Thomas, General Thomas, great individuals who really shaped the culture of our wartime military, and who really, I think, prosecuted the war on terrorism for a long period of time. And the lessons learned from McChrystal, McCraven, Votel, and Tony Thomas, just were immeasurable. I mean, I met Karzai. These are things that I never thought. The western suburbs of Chicago, I just never thought I would see myself in those positions. And, having to make decisions of life and death, and having to work in environments where really you're living in kind of a no-fail situation where, if you screw up, it's gonna cost a lot, and not in terms of, lives, but political aspects and all kinds of things. And so I think that those experiences over the course of, 10 or 12 years were just, they were phenomenal for me. And then, as I became a more senior officer, you're sort of, you get removed from the field, so to speak. And then I went to work at the Pentagon, which was another just, to see the level of sophistication that our national government brings to the world, and to work in that environment where those decisions are made, even at the White House, was yet another just unusual, a really just a benefit that I was able to work in that environment for a long period of time. And those experiences shaped me. And at some level, you kind of walk away and you go, it's great being an entrepreneur. I love what I do. We're rewarded greatly for it. But probably some of the most rewarding experiences that I've ever had have not been in financial reward. They've been through my experience in the military. To the point where it was hard to remove myself from that environment for long periods of time. So just great leadership, a real ability to see how we do business, and just honored to be a small part of all of that.
It had to make you way stronger when it comes to making business decisions. Like we look at, many people look at what's going on today with this coronavirus and everything else, and we have to make tough decisions, right? Who do we lay off and who do we keep, and what businesses do we have to shutter? I mean, as business leaders, entrepreneurs, a lot of tough decisions to make. But these decisions aren't that tough, man. When you look at the decisions you had to make when lives were at risk and politics were at risk and everything else. These decisions as an entrepreneur aren't that difficult, are they?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're hard decisions. Don't get me wrong, they really are. But I think that it's they're just not the same type of decisions, and they don't impact the same. They're just impacting different people in different situations, and I don't want to. There's no more weight on it than I want to place on it than that. But I think that it's, we all take our lives very seriously, and I think we should. But, I always had this sort of perspective where I would say that I took my job very seriously, but I never took myself very seriously. And I think that was an important perspective, right? I mean, I never wanted to think of myself as above anything. So, my job was very important, but I did not take myself very seriously. I would have to sort of kick myself every day going, I'm not really sure why people are asking me these questions, but I'm going to get the right answers and I'm going to provide the right answers. But, I can't believe I'm involved in this. And so those are the kinds of things that I think I look back on and, truly miss, because you really felt like you were making a significant difference in impacting the globe. Today I impact the lives of 420 people, and that's important. That's really important. But I was in a small way, in the chain of a lot of decisions that I think impacted a lot more people than that, and it made me feel like I was a part of something larger than me. So
right,
great.
Ozzy first.
And I think that, I think actually that McChrystal is speaking in some YPO series, if I'm not mistaken, even tomorrow. I'm not. And I think some folks have seen McCraven speak, just two of the greatest guys that I think, two great leaders, different in their approach to leadership, but two great leaders that really, I think, it did great things for the United States. I don't think their true stories will ever really be told, but those two individuals did great things for the United States.
Robbie, do you have a question?
Yeah, well, first I was just going to say thank you for serving. Sincerely mean that. And my follow-up question to that was going to be a curiosity around the fundamentals or frameworks of leadership that are taught in the military and how that's transferred into your entrepreneurial life. And obviously recognizing there's multiple different forms of leadership, but it seems like you had the opportunity to learn from some fascinating humans. So I'm curious, was it nuggets of each one of them that you sort of took into your entrepreneurial life, or was it a specific learning that you had throughout your studies there?
Yeah, I think it's just, it's almost basic. And I think some people, I think that there's definitely some punchlines, right? So, I think it's, leading from the front. It might sound like a punchline, but it's very true. You have to be capable and willing to do the things that you're going to ask your people to do, and without reservation, right? So, whether you're jumping out of an airplane, you want to be the first guy out of the airplane. And your people first, then I think those are the things that will reward you and the team members, and they will all pull together. I worked for a gentleman by the name of Ray Palumbo, General Palumbo, who was a young lieutenant during the Somali crisis. So Ray Palumbo flew helicopters in Somalia, and you know, you've seen the movie. And he became a general. He was my boss a couple of times, once forward in or twice forward actually in Afghanistan, and then he was my boss at the Pentagon. And one of the things we would talk about is our biggest asset. You know, our largest asset as the U.S. government is our people. And so if you embrace that, if you embrace the notion that people are your biggest asset, and you really, I mean, that's not it's a punchline, but if you really embrace it, that's where your reward comes from, because people will do great things if they really feel appreciated. And I think that's hard. It's always hard because sometimes, you know, for example, when you have to lay people off or furlough people, it's difficult to make them feel like they're part of the team. But those are the kinds of things that if you do it right and you do it and with the right grace, I think that you know, team comes first, and that's a big part of what I think is a part of every military organization, big or small. So, you know, lead from the front and team comes first. And I think that those are two key features that you always want to keep in your brain.
Yeah, I love
and
that.
it's simple. It's simple stuff, right? You know,
Right.
whether you're the last, you got to be the last guy. You got to be the first guy out of the airplane and the last guy in the chow line. It's you know, pretty basic stuff, but that's kind of the way it goes.
Yeah, I love the simplicity behind it.
Yeah, it's pretty simple, but you know,
So
take care
what
of
is your
people.
rank?
Right?
What is your rank today? Now you haven't retired or anything. You're still in reserves or what?
Yeah, I'm still a reservist, and I think you know, sink home is maybe pushing me to retire. So I think this summer, I think I will retire. And my rank is a captain, which is in the Navy. So that's the same thing as a colonel in the other services. The Navy has a slightly different jargon for its rank structure. So, but it's an 06, which is the same thing as a colonel.